All right, Terry, how's it going?
I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Really glad you had some time to carve out of your busy schedule to speak with me today because I think our last conversation about dirty electricity and suppression was really well received and had a lot of questions, a lot of inquiries about what we talked about, which was at a kind of like a more I guess a technical higher level of conversation with, what's going on with dirty electricity. If you're just watching this right now and you haven't watched that interview, I'd highly recommend checking that out first before listening to this, because this is going to be a bit of an extension. I'd really like to kind of go into some of what we talked about and kind of simplify it for people, but also get a little bit more granular because a lot of people are doing their own due diligence, which they should. They're researching things, they're talking to other companies, and I'm hearing a lot of stuff that just, from what I understand from electrical understanding, doesn't make a lot of sense. So I kind of wanted to get a little bit more in the weeds, but also just kind of simplify some of the things that we spoke about last time. So have some notes here. One of the things that I really wanted to kind of start with for people that really haven't listened to the interview and are just tuning in today, can you kind of go over what transients actually are? A lot of people have heard of dirty electricity, dirty power, but they're not really familiar with the term transients. And how does that differ from radio frequency, or what comes to mind for people when they think EMF or EMF pollution?
Okay. Fair question. One that I wish more people would ask. Transients are a direct result of everything that starts, stops, switches in an electrical circuit. Now, it's a very quick, extremely fast transient spike that can be anywhere from a few volts up to thousands of volts, like lightning. And they happen mostly when motors switch on and off, things turn on, turn off. There's always a transient that happens, and it's very troubling. It can be, like I said, tens of thousands or just a few volts or amps, and they can be very how do I say it? They're like a cancer of the electrical system. They're not really understood by a lot of people, including the engineers. They don't really give them enough credence as far as the importance on what they can do to an electrical system, or the flow of electricity.
Hmm.
And they happen so very fast that most people don't pick them up, and they can happen in all the different frequencies they can happen in. But we're mostly concerned with the sine tamer in the line voltage transient side, because they're so um, disruptive when it comes to electronic and electrical circuits and power supplies.
Right.
So yeah, that's
That's
what transients are.
So with transients being a problem, they affect power systems as well as human biology, which was kind of figured out
Yes.
later, right? Like the
Yes.
the extra hypersensitive people started noticing that when they would use some voltage suppression, they would actually get symptom relief.
Right. And with the EHS market, or the I say it's a market because it's become that way for years now, probably 10 years. Really with the way that the smart meter was introduced to people, and that's a higher frequency noise, that's part of the smart meter technology.
Mhm.
But, transients have really been around forever, every time something starts and stops. It's just that now our critical infrastructure of electronics, um, microprocessors, are not able to function properly with the transient activity because it interrupts the flow,
Right.
even if it's extremely fast. And in the higher frequency noise that we see from the smart meter, that's what is carcinogenic to people.
Mm-hmm.
They feel that they can tell when they have that on their system, because they get certain conditions or symptoms. And when you're dealing with transients on the power side, that's different than the transients that, or they're not, well, probably are, they're not transients on the EMF side.
Right.
When you start talking about airborne things and cellular and Wi-Fi, and that's a whole different game. That's on
Right.
the air side of it.
Right.
So people often confuse that with, transients of on the line voltage or the power wire itself.
Yeah.
And it needs to be dealt with.
And I think that's a really good distinction and nuance because a lot of people just assume if I wire anything, like I want to go wired internet, I want to go wired phone line, if everything power coming in, as long as it's on a wire, it's safe. But they don't really understand this principle of transients and that your LEDs and everything that's basically stepping up or stepping down voltage within any kind of electrical system, like refrigerators, microwaves, TVs, all this stuff is adding extra noise or extra transients on the line that's coming in your house, even though it's like plugged in and not this air style like Wi-Fi or
Hmm.
cell towers, like you're saying. I think that's an important
Hmm.
distinction. So
Hmm.
when we're talking about suppressing these and actually bringing the transients down and making, the sine wave inherently smoother, um, can you kind of break down the difference between true suppression and just attenuation or absorption or any of these kind of other modalities that are kind of being called suppression?
Okay, another very valid question. The a true suppression actually monitors the line of power or whatever it's trying to protect it's hooked up to, and it doesn't do anything or cause it doesn't interact with the power itself, whatever it's trying to protect. I
Hmm.
know I can speak for ours because it's the most effective we suppression there is on the market. But what we do is it's like, to give an example, it's like we put a ring around, if you think of it this way, you put a ring around the wire that you're protecting. And that ring of wire is around it, but it's not touching it.
Hmm.
And when it picks up some energy that is in excess, then it goes to remove that. It captures it. It normally it doesn't do anything. It just sits on the line and waits. So when you get a transient, then it goes in and it captures it and absorbs it, and then it goes through all its internal circuitry, MOVs and tons of levels of different things, and then it turns it to a form of heat and discharges it through the neutral wire or through the ground wire. And that's a proper suppression unit. It's not causing any change in the wiring or the function of the wire or the circuit, but it's there to look over it as Big Brother and then capture whatever energy is not good for it.
Right.
And that's how suppression is supposed to work. Unfortunately, we have this whole EHS and market that's happened, with sensitive people.
Hmm.
We end up with a ton of filters that are on the market that make all kinds of claims, and I get it. I don't really care of what they do and how they do it, but they're not a they're a capacitive filter. They're not a suppression unit. Suppression is a pretty widely used range, just like dirty power is.
I know. Yeah.
So, they what they do is that they hook right to the wire, and they pick up whatever transient activity. And in our case, in the EHS case, it's the higher frequency noise. And so they capture that higher frequency transient and they pull it in, absorb it, and then they push it through a capacitor,
Right.
which and then they shunt the energy from there onto the neutral wire.
Instead
So
of the ground.
yes. So what they do is that they just have created a false premise that they've gotten rid of it, because even if you're testing the power wire, you see that it's gone, but they don't see where it goes.
Right.
It goes to neutral, and in which case you're neutral, you get higher magnetic fields, you get higher energy, you get, higher everything on your neutral wire, and it becomes corrupted. This is a very big problem these days. I will say these days because I have how do I put that? I've been gifted with the ability because of my business and my power and the testing that I do. I've been given the ability to oversee and see what's changing in the electrical field, and just the general operation of things for for a long time. But I've been able to see a tremendous change in our electrical flow only in the last few years.
Hmm.
I I believe that my thoughts are that prior to COVID, we were only about, 70 or 75% um, completion rate of utilizing LED technology. And when COVID happened and the world shut down, a lot of businesses and corporations had it on the books. It was a future project to be able to expand. I'm talking about airports. I'm talking about everybody because they were given a chance with everything shut down
Right.
to implement. And now LED technology is probably like 98 or 99%. And I think that because it's used everywhere, you can't even go buy a regular incandescent bulb anymore. So I think that it has pushed our power systems, and I'm talking about from the home to the business to the company to whatever, it's pushed our power systems over a plateau. I firmly believe that now everything is infected with much more harmonic activity,
Right.
much more transient activity, much more everything, that it's making all our equipment, doesn't matter who I talk to, will not function properly. They can go out and spend $1 million or $2 million on a piece of equipment and it doesn't function properly. And so I think it's pushed it over a threshold. That added 25%. And then with the addition of variable speed drives in furnaces and air conditioners and, technology in general, which
Mhm.
isn't a bad thing, but I mean, there has to be a price to pay.
Right.
And I'm seeing it. I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand. And I've been able to put two and two together. And that's what I believe these days is that they can have all the goods and the toys and the fun, but they can't make the things work. And I think that's why. I think that's key.
Yeah, there's just so many levels, not just with power and electrical systems, but human health. I mean, you look at the LEDs and you got the transient component, which is affecting the lines and affecting the biology. You got the quasi point source light and the pulse rate or the flicker
Hmm.
rate, which all of these kind of things are affecting the nervous system and kind of
Hmm.
more subconscious aspects of the physiology that we're not acutely aware of, but do have its effects over time. So when you're talking about, capacitance-based filters, which is obviously if you're using capacitance, that means you're using more electricity, which costs more to run, and you're probably only working on one circuit at a time. So a lot of these, and there's newer ones where they hook it up, kind of like sine tamers hooked up right to the panel. But
Hmm.
generally, they're working on the same principle of capacitance, where you're talking about it shunting and
Yeah.
increasing the magnetic field on the neutral line. A lot of people, I don't think, realize that even if you're using like kill switches, like the neutral and the ground are always live by code, right? Like that's something that people need to kind of understand with
Yeah.
trying to prevent and isolate yourself from these circuits or the electricity from the house is that it's pretty hard to do when you have a live ground and a live neutral, wouldn't you say?
Mhm. Yeah. And I just had this conversation, I think yesterday in a long email, and I said, they were questioning, don't get me wrong, I understand the need for people, but they turn it too simplistic for a very intricate power system. So I understand they say, well, let's solve the problem by putting a kill switch on our bedroom where we sleep,
Hmm.
and our kids or whatever, and on that circuit. Well, like you said, you mentioned the power and the neutral and the ground are always live by
Right.
code
Yeah.
because it needs an escape route. If you have a sudden short or a shunt or a lightning strike or something, that energy needs to not just blow up everywhere in your house. It needs to be able to find a path to ground in a hurry. That's why everything is live.
Right.
and that's strictly it for lightning. And so, when you're dealing with suppression versus power filters versus, and I'm not saying that all suppression is built the same. It's not.
Right.
Every other suppression unit is our old technology. Sine Tamer's old technology because we invented it.
Hmm.
Um, and we're the only company that has actually kept up with the electronic age, with our with our attenuation tracking and all the neat little things that our sine tamer does. It's designed to get that power or that frequency line down to almost zero.
Yeah.
That's where we want it. And so like I mentioned before, we were never invented for the HS market. We still, in all forms of military and NASA and everything, they use the sign tamer to protect their sensitive technology. There's a reason for that because we're the best at what we do.
Yeah.
And not all suppression is made the same, and not like surely not any capacitive filters, whether they hook them to power or they hook them into the wall with a little plug-in unit, or they're all different, but they're the same technology, and they actually cost you money to run because you're paying the zero point 0.1 amp or zero point 0.2 amps that it takes for that little capacitor to function and
Right.
to work. And so there's I don't really want to get into the intricacies of the competition, but when it comes to cleaning power, there are no there's standards. Like if you're gonna say you're a suppression company, you've got to get your IEEE certification, all the certifications, you have to do a minimum protection level on your unit, and that's tested with different voltage levels and current levels. But the little capacitive filters are not. They don't have to follow that. They can say
Yeah.
whatever they want. So
Yeah. And that's the problem. And that's what I'm seeing and why I'm trying to educate more on this aspect of, you know, power
yeah,
and EMF because I mean, it's just a huge bandwidth. I mean, let's say like for everybody to kind of see a visual, like you have a sine wave, just a smooth, nice sine wave. Transients can be very large spikes or they can be micro transients. And like a
yeah,
lot of capacitance
yeah,
filters, they're only cutting off at a certain bandwidth or range. And you're
yeah,
not getting really these micro transients. When he's talking about monitoring 360 degrees of the sine wave, he's talking about bringing every micro and macro transient down to like virtually
yeah,
nothing, as
yeah.
smooth out as possible. And this is really important data points and information because I get a bit of blowback in the EMF community because like I've always been the proponent of like EMF isn't good or bad. I mean, a lot of people like to demonize it. We got to attack this thing, and it creates this kind of separatist mentality like I just need to live in a Faraday cage or wear silver clothing or do all this kind of stuff, and they don't really understand the principle of coherence, that your body's electromagnetic. You have
Yeah.
plasmoids, which are like charge clusters in and around your body all the time, interfacing and interacting in the living way with nature. They don't really get a
Yeah.
lot of this kind of stuff. And like, this is a super low hanging fruit way to
Mhm.
directly affect in a positive way the electricity that's closest to your body. And you're talking about the inverse square law, where
Mhm.
power loses different, you lose power over distance. I mean, this is like we got stuff, like Blue Shield and all these other kind of ideas and technologies where, we can mitigate the stuff you can't control from cell towers and
Yeah.
stuff that's like in the air, like you're saying. But
Sure.
this is really crucial understanding because I mean, I would go ahead and say, I know you're being like really, thoughtful and diplomatic, and I really appreciate that. But there's a lot of snake oil, especially in the dirty electricity filter side. I mean, it's just complete nonsense from what I can tell. And I've been, I'm no expert. I think you're a complete expert in this. This is why I'm talking to you. I'm not an electrical engineer, but I've been researching this stuff for, 15 years. So I know a
Yeah.
little bit about it. And one thing that I wanted to kind of go into more depth, if we can, on your technology is you were talking
Yeah.
about keeping up, with the modern electronics. Can you kind of explain, just in a kind of overarching, simplified view of how SignTamer actually monitors and identifies and acts on the frequency noise? Like, how is it actually kind of reading 360 degrees of the sine wave and really doing it to that level of specificity?
Um, another really good point. You're doing lots of that today. The frequency, that's the difference between sine tamer and all of the suppression, is that we react to the frequency wave itself, not the voltage and current levels above and below the peaks of the sine wave. And that may be over the head of a lot of people that are listening, but the sine wave has peaks and valleys in it,
Hmm.
and there's peaks at the top and peaks at the bottom. And the top of the sine wave is actually 173 volts, not 120. We rate everything in electrical, physical electrical field, at an RMS value, which is 0.707 of that, so it's 120 volts. That's to create a sort of a field, an equal playing field. And so in reality, that the peaks of the sine wave, both above it and below, excuse me, are quite a bit higher than 120 volt. So you couldn't react at 120 or at 173 because you would interfere with the flow. So, and I have seen when you talked about noise on our frequency wave and on the sine waves, that noise has been around forever. I I can't tell you from the first time I ever hooked up an oscilloscope or a power meter, I could see that noise, and it's literally, if you look at the sine wave, you can see a tiny, like, up and down. It's huge noise on the sine wave. It's always been there, but it's been attributed to different things. But now the noise that we're talking about that people can feel is the same noise, but now it is sensed more because people are they're more sensitive to it. And
Yeah.
that's where the EMF issues come from. But it's also very important to note, and this is lost in all of these capacitive filters and their claims. You cannot, it is impossible to try and remove EMF noise, high frequency noise, if you do not deal with the line voltage transients first, because one
Interesting.
interacts with the other. So,
That makes sense.
you know, you can
Yeah.
say, you can make a claim that you can remove this noise, but you're not able to dump it. You're not able to remove it and absorb it and get rid of it. You're going to just dump it onto the neutral line. Well, the neutral is, I think I mentioned this in the last program, is, I think, more important than the power wires now, because it's enabling our stuff to at least try and function normally. And when you're corrupting it with these filters, I think it drastically reduces the flow because of the neutral being corrupted. And it's such a big problem these days. And I'm not just talking about people's homes, and I'm talking about every business and corporation that we rely on to do their job properly to help us in society with their products. They're having troubles,
Yeah.
and nobody knows why. I
I
mean,
mean, energy grid level stuff,
oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And the power is literally clean. You know, they're mandated to supply us with 120, 240, all kinds of different levels of power. They're mandated. They know that the power that enters into our homes and our businesses has got to be clean.
Right.
That's not the issue. The issue is what happens within our home now with everything that we have, the microelectronics, the electronics. I think 90% of our problems now. It's all happening from within. So,
Right.
we have to beat that up. We got to get rid of it because that's what we're feeling if we're sensitive. So,
So if sine tamer is preserving the inherent sine wave, how are and eliminating these distortions or transients or bringing them as close to zero as possible? So why aren't capacitance-based filters achieving that based on their design?
well, because they're not able to clean up all the lines of power. They're not able to clean up the power wires, the neutral, and the ground. They're just attached to the power line, to the
Hmm.
power wire. So, they've got no technology. I mean, just take a look at the difference between a plug-in filter and a sine tamer. I mean, feel the weight, you know.
Right.
I mean, um, so, they're not, this is what is discounted so much by these companies that bothers me because people trust them. They go out and they buy them, and and if they feel better because they plugged it in, that's great. I'm not. I think great. Whatever the human body feels, great. But when it comes to science and technology and power and how it's tested and flow and frequency, that's a very critical part of our power system. And I sure I despise the things that are said and done, but I mean, I also don't hold shares in these companies and I don't care what they do, you
Yeah, I
know.
mean,
But
everybody's got to take everything with a grain of salt,
sure.
but I mean, that's why it's important that we, get this information out there because, you've been in this game so long and I'm, only been researching it for a few years. And I just hear, everybody from influencers to people that like they just get this superficial level understanding and then they go basically say something and a lot of people start believing it and passing it around. And
Yeah.
uh, it's just bizarre. And then, I receive emails and people are like, well, this is what this company said. I'm like, yeah, but if you use reductive logic and just actually like analyze what these
Yeah.
words mean and these phrases and like how it applies to electronics, it's just absurd what they're getting away with. And it's obviously unregulated and it's cool. Like people want to be unethical in their business. Like it is what it is. But
Yeah.
what can we kind of walk away with today? Like what metrics should a consumer or an engineer look for when evaluating if a filter's doing what the company says it's doing? What metrics can they look at?
This is the part that when people talk to me, I say, every time a sign tamer is installed in a home, the people always get back to me and said, honestly, I feel like I can breathe. It feels like my home, like it gave a sigh, like, ah, and so short of installing, because we're talking about some pretty intricate, fields, power, short of installing a power analyzer on your home, to show that it is indeed, transient free. I mean, you're never going to be 100% transient free, but I mean, we're we're as close as you're going to get it.
Right.
You're
90
going to
whatever
be a
percent.
very,
Yeah.
yeah, 1.7% let through voltage we have. So, it doesn't matter how big that transient, whether it's 10,000 volts or 400 or 200 or 10 or whatever, we're at 1.7%. So, that's um, and that with our warranties, what we guarantee. But I mean, it instantly when you put on a power analyzer, you use a scope and you're looking for higher frequency noise, and that's the key, But most people can't afford that. They can't afford to have somebody come in and spend how much money they charge. They have
Yeah.
to trust us. And I think, yeah, well, I despise the fact that we get compared all the time, but I mean, I said,
It's for the people that are ready for it and actually do their due
yeah,
diligence and like learn what the terminology is. Because I mean, yeah,
yeah,
you're right. Not everybody has a oscilloscope with a high pass filter or can
no,
hire
and
somebody that has one.
but people are listening now. They're seeing what's going on in the world. They know that they're not feeling right. They're not. The kids are sick. They're sick. They get headaches. They got migraines. I fix more problems over the email and the phone with people that have got, grounding and bonding issues between the neutrals and the grounds,
Yeah.
which is a big problem.
I mean, you can clean
And
up a lot of issues with proper
yeah,
wiring alone.
yeah. And they don't always buy a sign tamer, and I'm not that way. I don't say, listen, I'm not pushing sign tamer on you. I said, if you decide you want one, you're feeling bad and you fixed all the problems, be happy to help you if that's what you want.
Right.
But I mean, I'm probably the poorest salesman in the world when it comes to my product, but I honestly, I spend more time educating people now and to genuinely fix their problems with the power because,
Yep.
it's hurting them, and that worries me, but it's bigger in the States than it is in Canada. I think in Canada, our electricians and our the practice of how we wire homes and businesses is much more stringent than it is in the States, especially with the bonding and the grounds and running individual bus bars and things like that.
Hmm.
In the States, we see a lot of mix because I think laziness, whatever in the electrical field, and lack of knowledge. They got some great electricians down there, but not everybody is great.
Depends on the
You know,
area. Yeah. And yeah,
yeah,
codes. Yeah.
and I see a lot of that. So, it's really important that people, but they're not feeling good, and they feel it, and they see that, geez, maybe I should be looking at this
Yeah.
because, when you got to replace a brand new LED TV every couple of years and lights all the time, and that's transients. That's not that's transients that are causing that's functionality issues.
Yeah.
And that can be beat. But the problem that we have as a company, our set of companies, is that engineers do not understand transient activity. And they think that there is no product in the world, no suppression product that can fix it. So right away, they choose to go to harmonic filtering or things like that are not fixing the problems.
Right.
And so we're sort of caused this ourselves by not going out into the marketplace fast enough. It took us decades to figure out that we can help people in other areas. So,
Well, growing low and slow, you can only talk to so many people for so long and reach so many people. Like that's why I think this platform of making a video and just putting it out there for people that are ready to kind of understand the stuff and actually actively researching it and care about their EMF hygiene. I mean, that's really why I do this. It's like I'm not trying to sell everybody a sine tamer. I'm just like, here, what are the actual options that work? I just wanted it for me and my family for the longest time. And like, pendants, gadgets, EMF, shielding, all this kind of stuff. There's all these kind of give and takes, just like anything with
yeah.
health or wellness. But like, what's the low hanging fruit that's the most Swiss Army knife thing that we can do that has the most benefits across multiple systems? It's safe for everybody.
Mhm.
Sine tamer, like my current stack is like sine tamer and blue shield. Those are kind of like some take care of the air stuff and take care of the home that's in close
Yeah.
proximity while you sleep. And
Yeah.
I think the subjective feel is noticeable, but I don't oftentimes recommend or suggest the subjective field because a lot of people can't even feel when they're dehydrated or getting enough protein or like they're just not sensitive. They have no body awareness, body consciousness. So of course
Mhm.
they're not going to notice if their transients are massively reduced in their house, let alone, when they need to drink more water. So I'm one thing that comes, I get this email all the time. I just wanted to get your perspective on how you approach discussing this with these plug-in style capacitance-based filters. They seem to only work on independent circuits, and sometimes you have to have multiple on one circuit, like three in a room. Depending on how the house is wired. A lot of people ask, can sine tamer really affect the entire house? And like, why do some of these companies require you to plug them in everywhere? And why is sine tamer just at the box, and the incoming power into the house? And how does that actually affect everything with all these computers, TVs, refrigerators, everything connected to the house circuit? Does it just act like one big circuit and anything that's attached to it will get cleaned as the power comes into the house and moves towards all the electronics?
There is not a product on the market that will actively stop transients from happening. Those transients, whether they're line voltage or they're higher frequency noise or lower frequency noise, which is power, um, they instantly, when they happen, and they will happen from now till eternity, instantly they will travel so fast. I mean, you got to consider that a transient happens in the nanosecond range. So we just blinked a couple times and there's been thousands happened.
Hmm.
So instantly it travels around that circuit that fast. and then it goes back to the main panel.
Mm.
And there's where we install our unit, because everything coming back on every circuit gets clipped, gets taken away.
Mhm.
And then it's not free to roam, because that's what transients do when they're not taken out or removed.
So let me
They
stop you. Let me stop you right there. I just want to kind of interject because so when you're talking about roaming, so people will, I think in their minds, they'll think I'm around a computer. Transients are happening, like you're saying, you can't stop it. It has to basically make its way to the sine tamer to get cleaned up and clipped. So are we talking about a field effect, meaning these transients build up and create a field effect in the room that's harming people, or are we still getting kind of that little bit of exposure, just being like right now I'm recording this by a computer, there's transients, I have a sine tamer on my house, it's cleaning it up, um,
Yeah.
and of course we can't get rid of 100% of it, nothing's that efficient. What is it, a field effect that builds up in the room, or basically it's happening so fast that the biology doesn't have a chance to respond? And that's, I'm curious on that, why you feel so calm if they're happening still, and it's kind of, back and forth with the instrument creating the transient and the sine tamer in that communication.
Well, that's partly reason why you can't use one without the other. I'm talking about the higher frequency filters versus, suppression or sine tamer, because by removing at the panel, if you don't clip or remove the transient energy or stop the energy from moving around, it will eventually turn, it'll just keep floating around the whole power system,
Mm.
and it turns into a ring wave. And a ring wave is a longer wave action, and it will just keep happening. It's like progressive, power that's generated on top of the power, and it just keeps bouncing around, creating damage. It's like I said, it's a cancer.
When you're saying
So,
ring wave, it's not the same terminology as like a ringer wave, like an impulse wave. Is it this
um,
different?
yeah, it broadens, and the transient, instead of a very, very sharp spike, will start to broaden over time, and
Gotcha.
it flows around the sine wave. That's why it's so important that you clean the line voltage side before you even attempt the high frequency noise. And so that'll continue to happen. I mean, that's what AC current is, AC voltage, and what we use, it goes back and forth both
Right.
ways. It's forever moving. So we just found through extensive, research, that we know that we just have to clamp on at a panel, and everything's coming back to that panel, and that's where we remove it right from there.
Gotcha.
And you're not going to stop a transient from starting in your office when you turn on your printer, or flip a light on, or your motor starts on your furnace or your air conditioner. You're not going to stop a transient. I'm talking about residential wise.
Sure.
That's always happening, but you've got to get rid of them.
Right.
Because if you want to hope to achieve to remove the higher frequency noise, but there again, I didn't mention, we probably did in the other one, but the part of our tracking frequency, our um, attenuation frequency, which gets those transients down to a very minute level,
Mhm.
we have higher frequency filters from one kilohertz right up to 10 megahertz. So they've got a 30 decibel plateau. And so that's part of our tracking circuitry. That's why we're so effective at removing the noise, the higher frequency noise, to get it down to an almost zero level. That's why we have those filters. But it's to help our tracking circuitry. It was never made for EHS people, or, this kind
Right.
of stuff.
Well, that's sounds everything you're describing. That's probably why people feel relief, symptom relief with Wi-Fi routers, where no other plug-in device really even touches the high frequency noise on or sorry,
Mhm.
not a Wi-Fi, smart meter.
Yes. Yes.
So, like, I haven't seen anything besides Sine Tamer actually work effectively on smart meters, which everybody's kind of concerned about these days.
Well, that's because there are no products with our technology. They're not capable of, a lot of suppression products don't even clean. And I know there's thousands out there. from major companies, but a lot of them don't even clean the
Hmm.
ground wire or the neutral wire. You know, they just concentrate on the power wires, lightning, things like that, right?
That's crazy to
Lightning
me.
technology. Yeah.
Like, why would you not
So,
consider all lines? Like,
and ideally, if you're going to build a suppression unit, well, you don't want to shunt any energy. You don't want to move it. You want to absorb it and you want to turn it to heat. That's a true suppression. So,
dissipation, right? Yep.
yeah, you dissipate the heat. It's a very small amount through the ground wire, but that's getting rid of it. That's how you do it properly. And yeah, so
So, uh, I mean, this might be a silly question. I had this one as kind of like a final thought question about is do you think that the problem of dirty electricity has peaked, or do you see it getting worse the more technology we bring in? And what do you see as the future of dirty electricity mitigation? I mean, obviously, this sine tamer is the most evolved product over, however many 20 some years that you guys have been producing it and changing and, you know,
40.
evolving it.
Yeah.
So where do you see all of this going? Do you think they'll actually start making um, any kind of progress with alternating current and devices that step up voltage and actually correcting the fundamental root cause, or do you think we're just going to have to keep adapting the technology to keep up with the changes?
No, not as far as we're concerned. I'll get into that part, but I see our technology getting way worse just out of implementation, just because there's going to be more of it. It's going to be adding more onto our lines of power. And as far as the sign tamer technology, it's probably as good as you can get and really can't be changed because we did that for a reason. That's why we give a 25-year warranty
Yeah.
because the technology, we wanted to make sure that what we did in our tracking circuitry was the best it could be right off the start.
Mhm.
And I inquired with the factory a few years back. I got the engineers together and I asked them if there was a way that we could increase the 30 decibel rating on our high frequency filters. And they said, no, not really. I mean, that's, we could, if we went higher on the higher frequency noise filtration, it was going to cause us issues on our line voltage side.
Mm.
So I had to accept that. And, but that product for cleaning power is, it's actually amazing technology. And, yeah, it's price wise, I would say it's probably in the middle to lower end of suppression in the world.
Especially for
So
the type of technology it is. I mean,
yeah,
you have to
yeah,
understand it to really appreciate what it's actually doing, I think.
yeah, it's an amazing product. I'm still dumbfounded a lot of times when I install it in different applications and see what it does. And I know it's very good at what it does, but I mean, people they say the first off the thing is, well, I can go get a suppression product at Home Depot for 195 bucks or $100. And I said, well, yeah, go ahead. You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
Right up.
they just don't have, it's like comparing apples to peanuts,
Yeah.
type thing, right? But they just got to look at the specs on the sheet.
Yeah.
They got to do their homework, right?
It's not, you don't shop for price, you shop for effectiveness and what it's actually doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, companies like yours that are giving us the ability to reach people to that point and say, look at, you're sick, maybe you're not sick, but you're worried and and I did, like I said earlier, I just tell people, have you ever figured out how much money you have in your home in electronics and electrical items?
Right.
You know,
It's like an
you know,
actual insurance that's usable and
yeah,
has health consequences as well that are
yeah.
beneficial.
And
It's wild.
and I deal with corporations most of the time, and for them, they get it. They see it. They understand that they've got a fortune tied up in their technology, and but a house, the EHS market is it's fantastic. I've met a lot of really good people off it, and I've answered a million questions. But they got to know that they got a problem and it's around their house, no matter where they live, no matter what they're doing, it's around their house. And that's it.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you building these by hand for us so we can get them out to people. A lot of people that follow what I do, they're concerned about the rampant technology expansion and how that affects
Yeah.
physiology and health and how we've moved away from nature in that way and what we can actually do about it. And also, we're designing some cool stuff.
Yeah.
I know it's kind of at the infancy, but some consumer applications that haven't been done yet with this particular technology
Yeah.
that really haven't existed yet. So we're really excited about that and hoping we can get some traction on that sooner than later.
Hmm. Absolutely. I'm working on it now.
Cool. Well, thanks. Really appreciate it. Is there anything else you wanted to leave people with?
Uh, be safe and be healthy, people.
Awesome.
If
Great
there's a way we
advice.
can help you, we'll be happy to.
All right. Thanks, Terry. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Brandon.
All right,
Take
take
care.
care.